Thanks for joining us for another episode of Unfiltered. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we have a special guest with us today to talk about mental health awareness, talk about issues that we're going to get into. And I really want to just thank you for being here. I know that this kind of spurred from a meeting that I was at with Officer Byram. And after we got done with the meeting, you came by and kind of started sharing a little bit of your story. And it just really has led us to where we're at right now. So I don't want to take too much time in just kind of getting around the subject. So let's go ahead and talk. So Amber, if you'll introduce yourself, and we'll get into this.
Yes. Hi, I'm Amber Case. I have lived in Burleson for most of my life, and I'm also the executive director of a local nonprofit here called Harvest House. And I'm happy to be here.
Good. Awesome. When Officer Byram and I came out to, it was actually one of our Ministerial Alliance meetings. Yes. And we were talking about one of the things that Burleson Police Department is passionate about, and that's our strangulation ordinance. We were talking a little bit about it to the group, and afterwards you came by and you just kind of opened up to the two of us. And I was very impressed by the fact that you were willing to share that story, willing to talk to us about those things. And it just kind of came to my head to ask you if you wanted to be on this podcast and talk. And I think your immediate reaction, your immediate face was like, "Oh, hex to the no, I'm not yes. Definitely not doing this." But we asked you to take some time and just kind of think about it. And you contacted me and let me know that you felt like what you could share could help somebody down the road that's dealing with the same thing. Our strangulation ordinance is set to, if we show up to a domestic violence situation and we realize that one of the two is an aggressor and has constricted the airway of someone through strangulation, whether that be through hands or an object or a forearm or anything along those lines, that they're going to be arrested. We're also going to immediately bring out medical attention for the other person. And as we shared kind of a little bit about that strangulation ordinance, it touched something in you. And tell me a little bit about who you were growing up, and kind of where this led into our discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to speak to what you were talking about at the Ministerial Alliance. So when you heard you guys speak to that, something in me just immediately started stirring because it was so personal to me. And I don't know if you remember, but we were there to talk about something different.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you just started talking about that. And at the end, when you stopped talking about it, you said, "I have no idea why I said that. Let's get back on track."
Yeah.
And in my heart, I was like, I know why he said that, because I want to share. So when I came up to you and Officer Byram, it was really just to share with you how impactful that is. And I know we'll get into that a little bit in a minute, but that's kind of where this started. And I originally wanted to just share how impactful it would be, but also to be able to maybe partner with you guys on helping the victims. And then when you asked me about the podcast, you're correct. My initial response was, absolutely not. That's not what I'm here for.
Right.
But the Holy Spirit just really began to work with me. It took me about a month to really pray and think through it. So let's go back to your original question. So your question was kind of how I grew up. So I moved to Burleson when I was 11 years old, from East Texas, and I've lived here off and on for most of the rest of my life.
What part of East Texas?
Lufkin.
Lufkin. Okay.
Yes.
I gotcha. No, I have family all throughout Longview and Carthage areas.
Okay.
So,
yeah. So I was in Lufkin, and then we moved here. I was homeschooled. Grew up in a conservative Christian family,
Right.
Upper middle class. After I was homeschooled in the 6th grade, I went to a small Christian school. And then I graduated from Mansfield High School whenever Mansfield only had one high school.
Right.
It's changed a lot since then.
Go Tigers.
But I'm in the Burleson. I'm kind of in that weird area that's Rendon, that's 76028.
Yes.
But also Mansfield ISD.
Right.
So I had a very successful career as a paralegal. I also had a very successful career. After that, I was in business-to-business sales. And I was actually 29 years old, and I was in my dream job whenever I met the person that would eventually become my abuser. So my life was pretty stable.
Yeah.
I would consider myself a strong, independent church follower of Jesus. I had 2 amazing children at that time. And for all intents and purposes, my life was a regular middle-aged woman's, successful woman's life.
Right.
And then things took a turn.
So how did that turn start?
So in 2009, I was at my cousin's house, and she had a roommate that lived with her at the time, and that ended up being the person that became my abuser. We started a relationship, and now learning more about the codependent triangle, right? I was a rescuer.
Yeah.
And so here I come, I'm going to save the day. I've got all the things that this person needs. I can help them. I can help them grow. If someone just paid attention and saw who they really were,
Right.
then they would become this amazing person that I thought that I saw that they were.
Yeah.
Right. But little did I know that the devil uses people to steal, kill, and destroy your life. And that's where that destruction started. And it would continue on for the next 4 years. I had 2 children from him. Mm-hmm. So I have 4 children now. And off and on during those 4 years, I've had multiple police calls for varying degrees of violence. I would say that the violence wasn't how it started, though, right?
Okay. Yeah.
It's
the physical wasn't.
The physical violence isn't how it started.
How do you feel? I mean, looking back at it, where do you think kind of that first thought process of this was wrong, this is the abuse starting to creep in? Where was that?
Oh, that's a good question. Pretty early on.
Yeah.
I would say pretty early on, but it was so subtle that my rescuer, my fixer, part of my, and it's unconditional love, right? That's what you tell yourself in the beginning. Those are the lies that we tell ourselves. And if I just support them and love them, encourage them long enough, it'll be okay. But it starts with, the jealousy. It starts with the controlling. It starts with the slowly but surely removing you from those people that will notice that something's wrong or that you're not yourself. And, I've had a lot of people ask me over the years, where did it start? How did it start? When did you realize it was a problem? And that's the thing that's so hard about this is there's not a clear line.
Yeah.
It's like you wake up one day and you're there.
Yeah.
And you're like, how did I get here? How did this happen? Where did this start? I do remember a pivotal point where I went from, I talked about having the job, my dream job at that time, which was in a high executive in a sales position. And I remember very clearly getting on the elevator to go to work that day. And it was in downtown Fort Worth. And I went up, 3 or 4 stories, and there was a coworker on the elevator with me. And he's like, hey, are you moving again? I was like, am I moving again? He said, yeah, the last time you had those bruises on your arm, you said it was because you were moving.
Oh.
And that's the day I resigned from my job.
Wow.
So I think from that point on, whenever I resigned from my job, because now my financial stability is gone, begins to fade, right? And then there's more control, and there's more obsession, and there's more isolation that comes in there. So if I had to pick a moment where things really started to turn, it was probably that day.
Wow. When you mentioned jealousy as part of kind of that indicator, was it jealousy over was it over your job? Was it over the relationships that you had in your life? Was it over the type of person you were? When we talk about jealousy, kind of give me a better idea of what that jealousy looked like.
Really, all of those things. It just starts, if I can just, I'm going to probably say this over and over, it starts very subtly, that it makes you think it's attention, not jealousy. Like they just want to spend time with you. They just want your full attention. But after a while, it goes into every area. It's your children. It's your family. It's your job. It's the person that you are. It's the amount of time you spend getting ready to go somewhere.
Right.
It does not, it's everywhere. It becomes everything that is not the focus of you being your direct focus. Nothing else eventually becomes that nothing else matters but them and your focus on them, and the abuse consumes your whole entire thought process, right? How can I minimize the abuse? How can I, maybe it's not a big deal if I don't stay on the phone with my mom for an hour today because I know that he's going to start getting upset. Or so then you start cutting your time back, and then you start cutting your time back more in all the different areas. And then before you know it, you've let those that you care about down. You've let your children down. You've let your community down.
So you're taking time away from time, effort, energy, and everything away from all those others just to appease this one person. So essentially, they're kind of, lack of a better, they're kind of sucking the life
Absolutely.
out of you.
No, that is the word.
Yeah.
They suck the life out of you.
When we work a lot with our domestic violence coordinator here, Stephanie, and
Yes.
she's amazing.
There
Absolutely.
is no one else like her. I mean, I can tell you that if there would have been a Stephanie during what I went through, one time, if someone even half of what Stephanie is would have come, it would have changed things.
When she and I talk a lot about abuse, when we created the domestic violence posters, the ones that you see in the restrooms and across town are the white posters.
Yes.
So we like to call them. Those are our second iteration. Our first one, when the idea came to me about how to do this, it was really, a lot of it was focused on the physical abuse, and that was maybe my not understanding domestic violence and domestic abuse, that it's not just the physical. There is the emotional, there's the spiritual, there's the financial, even to the point that we talk now about the technological. A lot of young teens and stuff taking photos and then kind of blackmailing others, saying, if you don't do these types of things, I'm going to share these photos with people. There's a definitive line with the mental abuse, and then it turns into the physical. Do you remember the first time that happened?
Well, I want to speak to that, just that principle, and that is so true, because if you think about it, I mean, if I just walked up to you, or someone just walked up to me right now and hit me, I would immediately be like, there's something wrong here. And you would walk away.
Exactly.
It's the same thing with sexual abuse. It's a grooming process, right? And the education is crucial. Like you said, you started doing these posters. You started, and you've learned and you've been educated. That to me is critical for police, for legislators, for city officials, for family members. I mean, educating, understanding that it doesn't start with getting hit. It doesn't start with physical abuse. In order for someone to stay whenever they're abused like that, because that's the question, why did you stay?
Right.
Why did you go back? There has to have been a long process before there to get there, right? So understanding the red flags, what does that look like when someone begins to isolate? What does that look like when they remove all of these different pieces? They remove your financial, they remove your family, they remove your support. Your kids are isolated from you. There's nothing left.
Yeah.
Then the physical abuse starts.
Because you've got nowhere to go.
You've got nowhere to go.
Nothing.
And no one's going to accept that. Just walk. I mean, it's like a frog in the boiling pot of water.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
No one's going to accept that off the bat. You've already come to a place where there's some sort of a psychological break. Yeah. And so to answer your question, do I remember that? I'm going to be really transparent with you. There's a lot that I don't remember.
Okay.
So it's been 2013 is when we went to prison. So we're in 2020. So it's been 12 years. I've done extensive counseling and things like that. But just in preparing for this interview, when I was talking to my mom and I was going over, I was like, help me understand it. Is this what you remember? And she reminded me, she's like, Amber, you're confusing two incidences. There were two strangulation instances. So I remember vivid details of one of them, and then the after effects of that I combined with another one that I have completely forgotten about.
Wow.
And so my mom reminded me, and she gave me the facts around it, because I'm like, how do I know your memory's right? So she's like, remember whenever this one happened, you did this at the end. And when this one happened, this is what happened at the end. Yeah. And so to answer your question, I don't have the answer for that. No. I don't know the first time that the abuse started. I don't know the answer to that.
No, and that's quite all right to not know. And I think that actually even leads credence more to the question of, instead of there being a definitive line of being able to say, oh yeah, no, on March 2nd at 3:14, he slapped me, and that was the first time I thought, well, this is getting way out of hand. You're right. There has been such a long term of this kind of grooming cycle, that the abuse just kind of blends in
Yes.
together. It's not definitive lines. It's just this big shade of gray throughout the entire experience.
Yes.
Which is probably why the abuse becomes more and more and more, and the person being abused doesn't recognize the bruises anymore, doesn't recognize the hurt, because they're so used to the pain, that it's just kind of part of life, and that's hard, especially for people on the outside that don't understand that, because we've never been in that physical abusive or mental abusive situation before, to look into somebody's life, because that was one of the questions that I've written in my brain for today was, why didn't you leave? To me, that makes so much sense. If somebody is constantly abusing you mentally and then turns it into physically and sexually and strangulation, all the obvious for somebody on the outside looking in is just like, I wouldn't put up with that. Why don't you just leave? But that's not from the abusee's side. From somebody on the inside looking at that, that's just not an option.
So I did leave.
Okay.
I left a lot of times. The statistics say that, generally you leave 7 times. And after the 7th time that you either leave finally or you die. Yeah. So I think what's important that, when I was thinking about this and I was preparing for this, a couple of the things are like the key things that I want to make sure that people understand, and you and the other police officers here, is that it's not that easy. The best word I can describe it is grooming. You think about someone who is sexually molested or who has long-term or continuous sexual abuse or something. Why didn't they come forward? There's something psychological, and for me, I consider it demonic. I consider it a demonic stronghold that happens in that grooming process that causes a psychological break. And like I said, I've spent 12 years. I've done all kinds of counseling. I've had that question asked to me time and time again. And that's not a piece that I've ever been able to put back. Why did I go back? Why? It's just it's an anomaly. It's just this bizarre psychological break that happens, which is why it's so dangerous.
Yeah. Which
is why it is so important to get out before that psychological break happens. I often refer to the lady that's pushing the shopping cart on Lancaster, right?
Right.
And so I feel like that the next psychological break after the one where you allow the abuse is where you just completely disassociate with reality, and then you're the lady pushing the shopping cart.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me, I was so close to that point, because what is it that makes the person pushing the shopping cart that it's hard to rehabilitate them? Like they're almost gone beyond measure. Right? It's something, our brains are wired. I don't know a lot about how that works, but our brains are wired in certain kind of ways. We can retrain our brain. We can reform our brain in a positive way, and it can also happen in a negative fashion. Mm-hmm. And so recognizing the abuse in the beginning, making sure that it's not innocent, that police officers, family members, children, teenagers recognize the signs of what physical abuse, grooming looks like. It's more than just sexual abuse. One of my son's 14, and one of his friends had a relationship, and I was listening to the dynamics of those relationships, of that relationship. And I mean, it's like red flags are just bing, 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 bing. And I mean, to the point where we were in public, and the parent apologized to me that their child's didn't come up to say hi to me because the new boyfriend didn't want her to say hi to the old boyfriend. And I'm like, and we're appeasing this behavior?
Right.
I mean, it's like, I just wanted to, I of course, kindly to excuse myself from that, but I just wanted to this, your daughter is with an abuser.
Yeah.
This guy is going to grow up and do far worse, because that's where it starts. And I think because just this way with sin or any kind of sin, that it's a snowball effect, mm-hmm. right? And whether you believe it's in sin, it's sin, or whatever way you choose to believe it, it always starts little and it becomes bigger and it becomes bigger. So the more an abuser is allowed to do that behavior, mm-hmm. that monster starts to grow.
Oh, absolutely.
That sin is fed, that pride, that whatever it is, the disconnect that causes someone to be abused, or the longer they're allowed to abuse, the more control they get, the bigger and more powerful that monster becomes.
No, absolutely. I think it's small increments of power that continues to grow and grow and grow. And the feeling of, I got away with this, now I got this, now I got this. And the more I again, like you said, sucking the life out of them, there's something inside that person that is empty, and they're just continuously pulling resources from somewhere else to be able to feed themselves, whether it's their ego or their pride or whatever it may be. But it's a bottomless pit. You can't, until the
never satisfied.
Absolutely. And that's where the power of abuse physically, because you go so far with mental abuse that it can only feed you so much, and then that hunger begins to grow more, and then it turns physical, because the mental isn't getting you the rush or the need or the requirement out of it, and now the physical does. And now that I'm physically dominant over this person, now I have the ability to increase my power over them, but that just starts spiraling out of control. Like you said, it's either you leave or you die, and they're just going to suck the life out of that person. One of the things that you've mentioned, and I want to kind of get to, because it's important with this police department, definitely, is the strangulation. And you're talking to your mother, and you're trying to kind of remember those two, and you mix two into one. Kind of a 2-point question here: if the cops were called often, was it just not recognized? And I know. This department is going through so much training to learn and to be able to see, and that's part of what this ordinance that we've created allows our officers to do. That even in the slightest hint, it's better for our officers to say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and pull medical in, let them do a simple survey and help ask the questions that need to be asked, so that we can see if this situation is going on. I don't think you got that opportunity during your time.
No, I didn't. So, so one of the times was, I'll be very transparent with you. I avoided the police. I was, they come to the scene, and this is my experience. They treat me the same way that they treated him, almost like we were a burden to them. Right. The area that we were in this particular time was a pretty rough area of Fort Worth. I had lost my house. He had lost where he was living. I mean, it was a spiral of things. And so we had gone to his grandparents' house, which was in a very rough area. So the amount of police activity in that area, it didn't matter. Now, a couple times the police officer, or if I would get a good one, would pull me inside and say, "What are you doing in this neighborhood? You don't belong here."
Right.
But it was more like, I don't belong here, not like something's wrong. Like, why are you here?
Yeah.
It was just a question of you don't belong here. So one of the times, the time where I think, I had shared with you the letter, which I'll get to, was, and for the best of my recollection, it was this particular time, because like I said, I had confused it with that time. The police were called, a neighbor called the police, and I actually went and hid in another neighbor's house because I didn't want to face the police. The police humiliated me. The police made me feel like I was responsible for it, or that was my perception anyways at the time. Let me be, it was my perception. And so the police left, and I was able to call my mom that time. I called my mom because I had already, he had sent me to hide the house, and I had hidden. And during that period of time, he was over here. And so I was able to get away. So I called my mom, and she came and got me. And I mean, he had threatened her. He had threatened my whole family at that point. So she's like, I'm not I'll come get you, but I'm not bringing you to my house. Yeah. I'm not spending any amount of time with you, because his threats were serious. I mean, at this point, everyone in my life had, because of my actions and because of his threats, had completely removed themselves from my life. So my kids were not with me. I mean, it was a bad deal. And so I remember that I was smoking cigarettes at the time, and I wanted a cigarette so desperately that my mom said she's like, if you want them, you're going to go inside and get them. And I remember thinking, I can't go inside there because I was beat up. Yeah. And she's like, well, then if you want them, you're going to get there. So I went inside, and I remember These are the key things about how PTSD works, right? You remember weird things that put those memories together in your mind, which is kind of like the only concrete way that I know that they were real.
Right.
When I look back. And so I remember the guy at the 7-Eleven, he's like, wow. He's like, looks like someone took a baseball bat to you, which tells you the condition that I was in, right? Yeah. So fast forward to my mom is going to take me to Safe Haven. Well, you can't get into Safe Haven without a police report. So now we call the police again. My mom calls the police to report what's happened to me. And this time she tells them the whole story. And I'm there. I have a police escort that comes and gets me. I have to meet at the police station that takes me to Safe Haven. There was a letter sent out after that to him that said, hey, we would like to talk to you about a possible. So they've already been to the house.
Yeah.
There was a report that was made to the house. Obviously, they didn't see me at the house. Now I'm calling, my mom is calling, and we're taking me to Safe Haven. They transported me to Safe Haven.
And they sent him a letter
saying that they had a question. I mean, I don't remember how it was worded, but something, you've allegedly been noted, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Which made things worse.
Yeah.
Which made things worse because he got the letter. And I don't know if you know very much about predators or abusers, but letters and pieces of paper don't really stop them. They don't really respond well to such things.
Yeah. Duly noted.
If you're gonna commit crimes like that, you're probably not gonna be like, oh hey, hello police, you want to talk to me? Let's talk.
Right.
So
I got this letter and
right. So there was that incident, and I stayed at Safe Haven for a while. It's in a very bad part of town, and so one of the things about when you have to imagine, I'm already at this point where I've experienced years of abuse at this point.
Right.
I have nothing. So everything that I'm required to do requires me to get on the bus, to depend on other people. My family was like, if you want our support, you have to follow these steps. Well, I'm in completely broken state of mind.
Yeah.
Right? I am hypervigilant. I'm in the complex PTSD. That's turned into battered women syndrome, which, as I was researching to do this, I guess that's not recognized by the DSMV or what DMSV, whatever those acronyms are.
Right.
But it is noted as a form of complex PTSD. So I'm in, when you are, and if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like you can't focus on anything else if you're don't feel safe, if you don't have a place to sleep, if you don't have anywhere to eat, and then I'm in a bad part of town where everyone looks like a predator to me. I'm hypervigilant. I'm terrified of my surroundings. I'm at Safe Haven, and at that point, it's like the monster that I know seems a lot safer than all of these unknowns.
Yeah.
I'm eventually going to be sleeping in a park.
Your self-preservation starts kicking
right.
in.
And so then I start rationalizing, like, it's not that bad. I know how to mitigate this.
Yeah.
I know what I can do. I'm just going to go there long enough this time. And now I'm going to have a plan, right? I've got a plan. I know I'll be able to eat there. I know that I'm safe from the rest of the things out there. And I know this monster. I've learned him well enough. I'm going to do better this time. I'm not going to do the things that I know make him mad.
Yeah.
So you go back. It sounds crazy from where I'm sitting right now. It sounds crazy. Like I don't even really know that person. But what I do know is that person, in my opinion, deserves to be protected the same way that you would protect a child or an elderly, someone that can't protect themselves.
Absolutely.
Because, there's crimes against mentally ill, there's crimes against elderly, there's crimes against children. The reason why is because they don't, for whatever reason, they aren't in the capacity physically or mentally to protect themselves.
Absolutely.
I would suggest to you that once the abuse has gotten to where a woman is being strangled, she's not in the capacity to protect herself.
I can definitely agree with that. And I think that's part of where the strangulation ordinance kicks in. I know our officers and our firefighters, we actually, different story. Jim Schmidt came in. He's the stepfather to Gabby Patino. And one of the stories that he told while he was there was that, to make it a long story short, but he had continued to show up as a firefighter in New York to this lady's apartment. She would call constantly saying, I'm having a panic attack, I'm having a panic attack, I'm having a panic attack. And they would show up and they would come in and, she's freaking out. She's having an emotional overload of whatever sort. And they would talk her down, and they would, kind of just pat her on the back and wait for her to come down, and then they would leave. And he said they did that for like 5 or 6, 7 years. And he said, now that where I'm at now, after Gabby's murder, I went back and I re-looked at that and recognized the fact that she was being abused the entire time, but she was so scared to call in the abuse. She was reaching out to us, but never could say the words, and we didn't have the training to recognize. And I think that's a pivotal point for the ordinance here, is that our officers are getting the training to start recognizing who are the people that are out there, that their words may not say it, the physical may not show it, but there's something innate in all of us to see there's something just not right here. And even if it does cause a little bit extra paperwork, even if it does cause a little bit more time spent, I'd much rather spend that time and to try to figure out what this is, or to recognize these signs and get medical out here to do an evaluation, and to really give an opportunity to separate the two, and allow that one person, the abusee, to be checked out, and given that opportunity, and ask questions that, because like you said, you were hiding from the police, you were hiding from the fact, you were again in that self-preservation mode, but to remove them and give them a safe place to be able to speak or to be examined, and it's a have to. It's not us showing up going, well, this probably looks like it is, but you two just figure it out between yourselves, and we'll come back out here when somebody's bleeding. It's because we know through the research, strangulation doesn't always show. I mean, I think a lot of people see the TV shows, and it's like, you can see the handprints on their neck. That's how you tell. That's nowhere near anything. There's a lot of times where the physical signs aren't showing up at this moment, but there's something innate about getting there and seeing the situation and just going, yeah, we're going to get this checked out, and our officers and our firefighters being able to respond to that. Had that been available to you? Yeah.
Well, interesting that you brought up the Gabby Patillo thing. So Stephanie and I were talking the other day, and I told her, when I watched that documentary and I saw that body cam whenever Gabby was on the side of the road, I immediately, to me, she represented as someone who was being abused, she was in that state. I mean, I saw it. Like, I knew, that moment made me cry because she's panicking. To me, it was obvious. But what happened in that situation? They took him to a protected place, right? Not her.
Yeah.
So if they would have been trained, in my opinion, to recognize, so why is she, she was acting manic.
Absolutely.
Why is she acting manic? Why is he making jokes and cracking up? And it was the scene was just very apparent to me. I believe Stephanie indicated that it was to her because, we've seen that stuff. I've lived that stuff. And then to speak to, I was the self-preservation that I was hiding from the police. If I would have known that if I came out there and told the truth, he was gone, that would have been a whole different story. But that's not what I, thought would happen, right? Because that's never been a thing. Now I have to prove it. Now I have to take a chance. So if I take the chance to testify against him or to stand up and admit what's happened to me, and for some reason he doesn't get charged with it, what does that mean for me?
Yeah.
What does that mean for my family? Where does that leave me? But having an ordinance that I know that somehow I have education about, or I hear an officer say that if this is the case, he's going to be taken, that's my ticket out. And to know that I don't have a choice, I don't have to have the guilt or the shame, because at that point, again, you're in a weird psychological place where I have to feel like I'm the one who's pressing the charges because you're going to press the charges.
Right.
I don't get a choice. The state picks it up.
Yeah.
That's not the case. I drop charges all the time.
If it's not you and me sitting across from one another, and there's a young woman sitting on this side of the table, and you see it in her eyes. You know the situation that's going on. What are you telling her about your experience and why she should get out and how? I mean, I think that's probably one of the most prevalent things that we've talked about today is you get so sucked into this life that you probably look around and you don't recognize there are ways out. But either you're scared to do it, or you've just gotten to a place where you've just said, this is my life. This is what I am. And it's always going to be this way. And that's not the truth, is it? There is a way out.
There is a way out. I'm sitting here today because there's a way out.
Exactly. You're not the person that we're talking about.
Right.
That is a former self that you can look back on now, and your story, your testimony, the whole speaking on this situation hopefully reaches somebody that's sitting there in that situation and going, wait a second, there's a way out of this.
Yeah.
What do you say to that young woman across the table? How do you tell her that it's okay to get out of this?
So what I would say is, if I'm called into that situation, which I've offered, through Stephanie to be, then I would be in Burleson, right? And so I would know that I've got the backing of the Burleson Police Department and that ordinance. And I would tell her to trust her law enforcement, to trust her victim's person, and that there is a way out. And that my way out didn't come, which we'll talk about that in a little bit, didn't come until 7 years later, but it came through the programs that are here in Johnson County, right? I went to Crazy 8 Ministries. Okay. I got a job at Harvest House. I started going to Open Door Church. So the holistic approach that's available here in Burleson, the fact that I know that law enforcement here has an ordinance that will protect her. They're going to take him to jail. She's not going to be responsible for that. The state is going to protect her.
Yeah.
That there are safe places for her to go. I would encourage her for that, but I would also say to her that the risk for your life is at risk. Your life is at risk either way. If you stay, your life is at risk because either you're going to die or you're going to be so mentally incapacitated that you might as well be, right?
Right.
Or you can take a chance on your life over here, getting away and being able to start a life. But the longer you stay, the more chance that you have to die, and the longer it's going to take for you to recover. So he went to prison. Well, let me back up. And the more of a chance, at this point, let's go to 2013.
Right.
He was back in my home. I had my children back, right? So I got my children, and he had gone on a long stint of being really good, right? He was on probation for one of the strangulations that eventually led to probation for him, and I let him back in my house. He didn't abuse me again, but he abused my daughter. So the monster that the longer that you let that go on, you may think that you have permission to allow that to happen to you, but the kind of person that can take away the air in someone's lungs is the same kind of person that can abuse your children too, especially if they are not their biological children. And so at that point, I finally was like, you can't touch my daughter.
Yeah.
Right? And he went to prison. So here I am in 2013, a completely broken individual with 4 children. And so for 7 years, he was finally out of my life because I took that to the fullest extent that I could. Right? And so they revoked his probation. He went to prison on 6 different charges.
Wow.
For 12 years. One of which was the restriction of the airways charge for me. So obviously someone that can commit that kind of crime can commit a whole bunch of other crimes, right? But it took that incident to finally, I guess, and he pled guilty to all the charges and went. But for 7 years of my life, I lived in complete chaos. The mental damage did not just end, when the physical ended. a spiritual component of that for me. And I believe the only way I could really tell my story is to tell this. So there is what's called the Leviathan spirit, right? The Leviathan spirit is a choking spirit that enters through trauma. Okay. And it was until, I had a full on deliverance, it was a wild, but that's a podcast. That's a different podcast, right? But it was, for me, all the counseling that I got, all of the, I tried the rapid eye movement. I tried just all the different forms out there. And it was not until Jesus and the restoration that I got from the deliverance of that choking spirit. I would not be able to have a conversation with you like this without my airways being restricted. I have family members, people that can testify. I could not speak.
Yeah.
My throat would begin to close. And anytime I try to talk about anything serious, anytime I try to work through things in counseling, my throat would close.
Yeah.
And I couldn't talk. I experienced homelessness. I turned to drugs to numb myself. I could not, the flashbacks, the memories, the having to try and talk about the trauma. So I just completely shut it all down. That for me was self-preservation.
Yeah.
Because the only thing I knew, because at that point I didn't know the restorative power of Jesus. I didn't know that there was something that could completely restore my life and the broken pieces. And I honestly don't know how someone gets put back together after all that without Jesus.
Yeah.
I don't. But what I would say, back to the original question, what I would say to that young lady is that you can recover. I'm the executive director of a huge nonprofit in Burleson. I help people every day. That's my ministry. I have my children back. I'm married to an amazing man who loves me, who loves my children. It's going to be hard either way. Choose your heart. If you leave today, you have a chance of living. You have a chance of your life being restored. If you stay, what are the statistics? 75%, I think, of women whose lives are ended in domestic violence, there was strangulation involved. If you have someone who is willing to put their hands on you and take your breath away, they're going to kill you. That's just the truth. Mm-hmm. Unless you allow law enforcement, unless you allow your victims assistance, and if your city doesn't have one, come talk to Burleson, because it is absolutely critical and imperative to have an ordinance like this to protect the most vulnerable people who may not be able to protect themselves.
Absolutely. There's the decision to make it, to walk away from this, to get out, and then there's the help that comes with it. And I'm proud to be in a city that has both.
Yes.
People that are strong enough to make that choice. But like you said, being broken, you can't do it on your own.
No.
Yeah, and I will double what you said. We have a great victims assistance coordinator, and we'll be putting the link down in the comments, but we'll also put it in the podcast comment section. It's a click away. Help is there.
Yeah.
And even if it's just, I'm not sure what I'm experiencing. Maybe it's not a cut and dry domestic violence situation. Maybe it's just there's an abuse happening, but you're not 100% positive where your rights are. Mm-hmm. You can follow that link. It'll lead you to a lot of documentation. Simply just fill out the form. Stephanie will contact you. That's the greatest thing, is to have somebody who has been there and understands and has seen all of it.
Yes.
For that person to be able to call you, you're not a number that hey, you're 1, 2, 3, 4, and I better, somebody's gonna pull that file out and start working. I mean, it's an actual physical person that's gonna look at that email that's sent to her, and she's gonna contact that person and start working.
And she
with
will.
them. Oh, absolutely.
And she will contact them. And
it's amazing how quick it happens, depending on obviously at what time you scan and you send that stuff in. But she's pretty darn quick with that.
She is. And I would also say that, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, my name is Amber, and I'm at Harvest House, and I can be your first point of contact. And Stephanie, we have girls that are fleeing domestic violence that come to Harvest House all the time. And after a few conversations, because it's a safe place, we call Stephanie and she meets them there. You know,
Absolutely.
she will come, and she's quick.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Every time I call her, she comes. I'm like, I've got someone here that needs to talk to you.
The really cool thing is we had I want to make sure I'm saying these things right. So I need to kind of protect Steph on some of these. But we've had, for instance, people outside of Burleson that saw the posters or saw the post that have contacted through our channels, and they're like, I'm in a situation and I need help. And Stephanie's like, well, where are you at? Well, I'm at XYZ place. And it's like, well, that's not even remotely close to Burleson, but here's what I'm going to do. And she starts researching area, people in that area that can help, and gets them to somebody that's able to help them. And I know that we're bordered around Johnson County. We get a lot of inquiries kind of from like Alvarado and Crowley, because those people come into Burleson to eat and do those things. They see the posters, they scan it, they're in that situation. She's never once been like, hey, I'm sorry, you're not Burleson. We'll best of luck. And then click, she gets a hold of the Family Crisis Center in Johnson County, or Reach, or someone who can help, even if that's not a Burleson type of thing. But that doesn't stop there. She still contacts and checks up on them. She's honestly one of the best people I know. When I grow up, I want to be just like her.
Yes, me too. Me too. We love you, Stephanie.
But that, I think that goes into credence on what this this organization, not only the police department, our fire department as well. That when somebody is in need and in hope, or is in need and is looking for hope, it's a phone call away. It's a text away. 911. You can text 911. I
didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I try to emphasize that all the time with anybody that is dealing with a domestic violence situation. My brain always goes to the he's hit me and I'm in the bathroom and I've got my phone, but he's also at the door so he can hear what I'm saying. He's apologizing through the door and stuff like that. It's never going to happen again, baby, and all that kind of stuff. But you know you're in a bad place. Pull out your phone, put 911 into the message area, and then start texting. It sends it straight over to our dispatchers. They will have that phone conversation with you through text, and everything is exactly the same as if you're talking to them. So
that's great information. I did not know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Text 911 is probably one of the most underrated and unknown about the 911 system. I think it's been in for a couple of years. It doesn't get broadcasted as often, and I don't know why, because nobody talks on the phone anymore. So everybody is texting, and that's another one. You can literally be in the car and just had a situation and can text from your vehicle. It's going to get the same attention as a normal 911 phone call is. It's just simply through text message. So that's awesome. That's an emergency resource that I hope people know about, and if you're, God willing, you're ever in that in that situation that you need that type of help, that's available to you as well. So before we as we're kind of wrapping up on this, we've talked about kind of where you were, where you started, and the situation that you're in, and him going to jail, and you finding this deliverance and things along those lines. But tell me about who you are now.
Yeah. So for about 5 years, it's since 2020, my life has continued to just be completely renewed by God. As I said, I'm the executive director at Harvest House. I started out though there as a resident of Crazy 8 Ministries. I was, at that point I was homeless with my children, and so I went into that program. They gave me an opportunity as a part-time receptionist, making $8 an hour. Just gave me a chance, right? Because I hadn't had a stable job in 10 years. So I had an awful resume.
So let me pause there. You were you were doing the paralegal, and you were doing the sales in a high rise, taking an elevator in Fort Worth all the way up
window office
to $8 an hour.
Yeah.
Life made a shift, didn't it?
Huge shift. And I mean, nothing. Like, we started back over numerous times, we being me and my children, numerous times with nothing. But in 2020, when I started with my biblical counselor, I completely had made a commitment at that point that I was going to do the work internally to find out. I was no longer satisfied with numbing myself with the consequences of the behaviors, right? At this point, I'm like, okay, it's been 7 years. I can't continue to blame those situations. I have a duty and a responsibility to myself, my children, to figure this out,
You've
right?
decided not to be a victim anymore.
Right. I decided I was done with that, right? And so I completely poured myself into understanding where I was, not exactly how I got there, but the things that had attached to me, if you will, the learned behaviors that I brought out of that situation. And that took a lot. I mean, a lot of internal surgery, right? I did it with God. I did it with myself. I became honest with myself, which I think is what allows me to be here. You know, if you don't admit there's a problem, if you don't own up to your part in the decisions that are made, then you can't start that healing process, right? And so I began to also to serve other people, right? So at Harvest House, we serve the most vulnerable people.
Right.
We see people in all sorts of different walks of life. And so I began to help those people. I began to support those people, and they helped me as much as I helped them. There are very few things, you know, I have a whole other life of different stories and testimonies, but there are very few things that a person can walk in and say that they've experienced that I haven't experienced. And so from that, God has used that, right? The Bible tells us that by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of our testimony, we overcome. So through my testimony to our clients, through my testimony to the most vulnerable people that God has put me in charge and in contact with, my life began to change. My life began to shift. The atmosphere of my life began to shift. The curses that were literally attached to me. I mean, I was constantly having a flat tire, and my car was breaking down, and my wallet would get stolen, or, you know, just the constant chaos. It stopped. And my life began to be renewed, and my mind began to be renewed, and my purpose began to be renewed. And, you know, the Bible tells us that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And I fell in love with the person of God. I fell in love with the heart of God and with the restoration power of Jesus. And I'm called to his purpose, which is for me to serve others. And it's all worked together for good. I'm able to sit here and have a conversation with you, which I will tell you is the longest conversation in one setting that I've ever had about this, ever.
I'm honored.
You know, I got married 3 years ago to an amazing, godly man who just, you know, when he and I talk about these stories, he has a hard time equating these stories with who I am now.
Yeah, right.
But even talking with him, it's hard, you know, and he's my husband. And this is a huge step also in my healing process and I continue to see the miraculous power of God. I continue to see what it looks like when you actually finally get away.
Yeah.
And that you aren't the sum of those circumstances. I'm not the sum of who I was during those 9 years. The devil wanted nothing more than for shame to be my story. What I went through and the choices that I made in that are pretty embarrassing. I made some pretty yucky choices. You know, it wasn't all based upon somebody else's responsibility. I had a part in a lot of the decisions that I made, things that affected my children. And
don't you think that's part of one of the biggest reasons why it's hard to ask for help?
Yes.
You're so ashamed.
It's crippling.
Things that you're doing.
It's crippling. But there's something better. You know, I've had 5.5 years of an amazing life. 5.5 years of being able to live an abundant life that God has called me to live in spite of all that abuse. I sleep peacefully at night. It's my favorite thing to do.
That's
I
awesome.
love sleep. You know, that was a long time coming because of nightmares and flashbacks. And, you know, I can finally come to a place where I'm not looking around corners thinking that someone's out to get me. Now, there are still things, if we're being honest, you know, a loud noise will startle me. Someone slamming, you know, there's no slamming doors in my house. There's no slamming cabinets. There's no throwing things.
Yeah.
There's no wrestling with hands on your throat in my house. And my kids know that. So there's still things, bits and pieces that of my story and my PTSD that register in my mind. But for the most part, I'm living the abundant life that God's called me to live and that God created me to live, in spite of 10 years of absolute living hell.
You are definitely an inspiration.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the thought process of, because that was one of the first meetings you'd gone to with the Ministerial Alliance.
It was my very first Ministerial Alliance.
And Officer Byram had grabbed me at the very I was putting some video together, doing whatever I do in my little dungeon office that I have, and I remember.
Do we need to get you a better office?
No, I like it. It's cold.
Okay.
It's quiet.
Okay.
No, but but it is like in the back dungeon.
Okay.
Nobody knows I'm back there. Sometimes I look down at the clock and it's like 6, and I'm like, oh, I bet everybody else is gone, and I totally forgot to check the time. And I missed 15 texts from my wife, so that should have been my
You were taking a nap in the dungeon.
That's a different podcast and a different day. The fact that I'm sitting back there, Officer Byron comes in and it's just like, hey, I don't know why, but you want to go to this? I've gone to a few of them before, but normally, he's so busy, he's running off and doing it. He just stopped by the office that day and was like, hey, I don't know if you're able to. And I just, yeah, man, I'm tired. I'm facing to the computer. I need to get away for a few minutes. So we sat, we're doing the whole, go around the table, introduce yourself, and talk. And boy, it was just a moment of just like, and you know what? And blah, 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 and I never have a problem talking.
Right.
Stopping talking is my fault. But then afterwards, you came up with a purpose. I mean, you just rushed up and it was a, hey, I need to tell you something.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could see, it's like right before a volcano explodes. Yep. It's that nervous kind of emotion of I've got to let this out, and the in the verbal vomiting. I hope that's gross enough for everybody, but yeah, the verbal it's just all of it's coming out at the same end.
Yeah.
And it was just listening to what you had to say, and all that I could think of is, she understands. She knows. She fully has been there, done that. There's somebody out there that doesn't.
Yeah.
They're in that.
Yeah.
Where she was. I need to help them. I need to get this information to them so they can see where they can be.
Yeah.
And
that's
a really amazing thing about this conversation is it's that movie that ends and then the little words pop up and it's like, Amber finally found her real life, and she had a wonderful marriage and lived happily ever after and stuff along those lines. And I want to find that end credit part for everyone.
Absolutely. That story is important for everyone. And I think it's interesting. Like, you just see the fabric of God and the Holy Spirit working through, like, you weren't supposed to come. God invited at the last minute to come. It was my first one. And one of the things that I've learned over the past 5 years is to pay attention and be obedient to what the Holy Spirit, when I start to feel that stirring and that unction, because I haven't listened to it so many times. And that's part of, searing your conscience, quieting that still small voice inside of you, whatever you want to call it. I listen to that very, very closely, and I'm obedient to that, right? And so that building up, the volcano that you're referencing, right? It was the Holy Spirit, and I'm over here negotiating with him. I'm like, I am not going to talk to them about this. Like, this is not the time or the place. This has nothing to do with me. Like, come on, Holy Spirit. I don't talk about this in public, like, especially with peers that I'm working with, professionally. But there was just I'm like, okay, if I don't say this all and say it right now, then I'm not going to say it.
Well, and I love that idea. The part I think that we can kind of end on is this: your story is helping someone create a story that's going to help someone.
That's good.
I think there's somebody that is watching this, or somebody that's going to share this to someone that is living the life that you used to be, to show them that there's a life after, and that person's going to take this, look at it and say, I'm done and I need help. They're going to get the help they need, and then their life is going to change.
Yes.
And then they're going to turn around and they're going to find somebody who's there, and it's just this constant passing it forward. You
Yes.
know, it just where that person's at to be able to help the people that are
Yes.
there. Because I'd love to say that abuse is going to go away, but I'm not going to Bible preach. But
Right.
you know, there's a day and there's a time that all of this will be done, and that'll be it.
But you could minimize it with an ordinance like this.
Absolutely.
You can minimize it.
Absolutely.
I firmly believe that.
Amber, thank you so much for being here,
You're
and
welcome.
I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for all of this. So with everything that's been said, if you're someone who knows of someone that is in a situation like this in their life and they're needing the help, maybe they're not ready yet to step forward, but you see it happening, look into the comments section, or go to burlesontx.com and look at our Burleson PD page. Look up Victims Assistance. Just Google Burleson Police Department Victims Assistance. You're going to get the correct link. We'll put that link in the descriptions. Fill it out. It's not, you're going to get Stephanie. You're not going to get the police. The police aren't going to come busting down your door the moment that you scan the QR code. It's a helpful area. It's to help get you where you need to be. And if the police need to get involved, they'll get involved. If the police are not necessary at this moment, Stephanie's going to guide you to where you can get help, where you can get the resources. It's imperative. I know you're strong enough. We know
Yes.
you're strong enough to do this. And the Burleson Police Department, the City of Burleson, the Fire Department, there are people here that want to help you. You just have to let them. You just have to let them. You
Yes,
got to
that's
get out
good.
there and do that.
That's true.
So, Amber, again, thanks. Big time. Boom. Appreciate it. We'll see you on the next one.
We're done.
Woohoo! Yes, go ahead and hit stop recording.